the job that I think is really that we're all going to get to do, which is the most fun job for me, and I think for many people, is like the super IC job, where you still have to be senior and strategic and autonomous enough to figure out, in the context of product management, what product should be built. How are we going to deliver it? How are we going to make our customers aware of it? Typically, that includes activities like talking to customers, trying out competitor products, trying out things for yourself, doing interviews about where people struggle in their day. That comes up with the how to build, the what to build. Then there's the find the right engineers and designers, motivate them, tell them why this is important and exciting and cool and why it's going to work, and work through all the nitty gritty trade-offs that come up in actual execution. And then it's figure out how to get it to your customers, whether it's via tutorial videos or email blasts or just flipping on a feature in some UI. Like, we're all going to have to do that job.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Supra Insider. This time, Marc and I sat down with Jacob Bank, the founder and CEO of Relay.app, a company building AI agents. Before starting Relay.app, Jacob was at Google, where he was a director of product management. And before Google, Jacob founded a company called Timeful, which was ultimately acquired by Google in 2015. Timeful was focused on the intersection of AI and behavioral economics, which are both subjects Jacob was very familiar with from his time at Stanford, where he was a PhD student in the AI lab, focusing on the intersection of AI and behavioral economics. This conversation was fascinating, and I learned a ton. We talked about what AI agents are and are not, and why a lot of people are misusing the term AI agent right now. We talked about how to set up workflows using AI agents to really supercharge with the things that you need to do well. For example, Jacob went pretty deep on his workflow for generating content on LinkedIn, or at least drafting content on LinkedIn using AI agents. And then we talked about the most important aspects of AI when it's going to come to skill sets for product managers in the future. And specifically, Jacob has a very interesting take about why having intuition about which AI tools to use and when is going to be the most valuable skill for product management in the future. Without further ado, we bring you the conversation with Jacob Bank. Enjoy. If you enjoy this conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcasting app, follow us on Substack, give us a rating. It'll help us a ton and help future people discover us while also making sure you never miss an episode. Thank you. Awesome. We're live. Jacob, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, great to be here, Ben and Marc.
I've been really looking forward to this. Marc and I are on a mission this year to stay on top of what's going on with AI, co-pilots, agents, you name it. We're trying to learn about it, prototyping tools. I think you popped onto my radar because you've just been on a kick to drive awareness for your company, Relay.app. We're not here to do a promotion for Relay.app, but I thought we met, loved your energy. I think you're thinking about all kinds of use cases for automation in the space, and there's obviously a lot of demand for what you're building. Recently, you made a post on LinkedIn that got, was it over 500,000?
Yeah, so far 550,000 impressions, 4,500 comments, 2,000 some reactions. That was not expected at all.
Yeah, and this was just about a webinar that you're hosting on how to build a certain kind of AI agent. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out like the right content format that will help people figure out how to apply AI in their work. And it's honestly been pretty tricky because to set up a real running AI workflow, even for me who works in this space, takes like a solid hour. And if you make a post on LinkedIn with an hour-long video, that won't work very well because people are not scrolling their LinkedIn feed or their Twitter feed looking for an hour-long video. If you just post one of these like teaser demos that's 90 seconds and it hits the perfect case beautifully that we know never actually happens in real life, that can leave someone intrigued but no more informed about how to actually do the thing. And so what I found has worked for me recently, and this is just like in the last 2 months, is I do some sort of teaser post on LinkedIn that just describes, here's the use case. I built an AI agent to do blah. Here's what it works and here's how it does. If you're interested in this use case, let me know. And then I'll make some longer form artifact or template or something that you can actually use it for. And I'll usually accompany that post with like a GIF or like a very short animation that shows the thing in action. So the first LinkedIn post I wrote that hit over 500,000 impressions, it followed that exact format. It was just like, I built an AI agent to automatically look up LinkedIn profiles. Here's how it works. You give it the person's name, email, company, like whatever information you have. You stick that in a spreadsheet. It will automatically search Google and then try to parse the results because Google is pretty good at publicly indexing LinkedIn profiles. Let me know if you're interested. I had this little GIF that showed a spreadsheet with like 20 people in it, and then it showed them filling in one by one. And that one I thought was going to go viral because I had seen other posts with a similar format do really well. And I wasn't expecting it to do that well because my previous most viewed post ever was like 30,000 impressions. So this was like over an order of magnitude bigger. And I've had a few other posts that have that. Pretty much all my posts have that format because that's my whole thing. That's what I do. I talk to a customer. I figure out what they want to use AI for. I make a thing, see if it actually works for myself, and then I post about it on LinkedIn. That's the whole, there's no like magical hook formula, like, do this, misdirect that, this LinkedIn template. It's literally, I come up with a use case from a customer and I write a 5-sentence post about it and I see if anyone cares. And so those, have had varying degrees of success. The one I posted a couple of days ago was the blandest webinar announcement I've ever posted. Like it literally, the text of the post was just, if you want to get started with building an AI agent, but you don't know how to do it, like I host these build with me 1-hour sessions, live interactive session. The next one's coming up this Wednesday, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. Let me know if you're interested in joining. And then I think I had a brief note that's like the use case we're going to build out is an AI agent that automatically tracks the prices of your competitors. So I want to tell people a little bit like what we're actually going to build. Let me know if you're interested. And I was expecting, I don't know, like 50 comments and a couple thousand impressions because the goal of this post was not to reach a super broad audience. It was just to reach the people who already follow me and already like this AI agent automation content and just like get them invited to the webinar because we only had like 50 signups and I usually like to have more like 100 signups. Like, let me just juice it a little bit with a LinkedIn post. And now I have 4,500 comments I need to go back and reply to. And I was trying to figure out like what is going on here? Like, why did that very simple webinar announcement resonate? And I don't know for sure, like the algorithm still remains mysterious to me. But I think the demand for educational content here is super high because there's no shortage of promotional content. Every day you can scroll Twitter and LinkedIn and see hundreds of founders demoing their product, promoting their product, talking about how their product is awesome, showing the like beautiful 10-second case where everything happens to work perfectly. But there's not that much great educational content. Even the people who are like AI influencers, like the Liam Otleys of the world, or if I think of like other productivity influencers like Ali Abdaal, Kevin Stratvert, and those guys are amazing at making educational content. But their content tends to now be around like, how do you build an AI agency? Or like, how do you build YouTube videos? And there's not that many people who are just sitting in front of a computer for an hour actually making an AI agent with you, which includes, I've done a few of these webinars so far now, and things don't work a lot of the time. Or like we get it working eventually, but the whole point is to take people through the whole journey of like, well, maybe you'll pick the wrong model. Maybe you won't write a good enough prompt. Maybe it'll turn out like this information just doesn't exist on the web and you need to find some other approach to it. And so I'm not saying that this is like the perfect educational format, but man, is there demand for educational content here on a wide variety of AI use cases.
What's coming to mind to me is I was just imagining Twitch, where people like to watch other people play video games. Are we having one of those moments for people wanting to watch people use these tools and just see them in action?
I think you're totally right. I remember when, I don't know, StarCraft streaming first became popular, or at least when I first found out about it in probably like 2010 or 2011. I'm sure it had been popular in other places and for more hardcore gamers for many years. And I remember trying to explain, I'm not a big gamer, but I remember trying to, hey, it just came across my YouTube feed and it's actually fascinating to watch people play video games. And people are like, what are you talking about? And now, of course, esports is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And we've seen this a bit. So there's this guy, Andre Karpathy, who was actually, funnily enough, a PhD classmate of mine at Stanford in the AI lab many years ago. He's now a super famous AI practitioner, And one
He's
of
like
his
the
roles
guy,
as an
basically.
AI educator and influencer. And so he'll make these 3.5 hour videos of just like him writing code to make an LLM. And these videos, and I was like, who's going to watch a 3.5 hour video of some guy coding? But like these videos have millions of views because that's the way to actually learn how to do the thing. It's imagine pair programming with one of the best programmers in the world. And so I think what we're going to see is an evolution of different educational content lengths targeting different audiences. So there's got to be like the 5-minute overview teaser, then there's the 1 hour interactive session, then there's the literally like the 10-hour course where it's probably split into like 10 1-hour episodes of how to do each component. The thing that's tricky is that people, if you're building a coding, like a watch me code kind of thing, you can sort of assume that everyone knows some basic building blocks of coding. Like everyone will probably know what an if statement is, and everyone will probably know what a for loop is, and everyone will have some basic level of code readability. In the world of building AI agents, you can't really assume any level of technical knowledge. And so that's been something that's been really hard for me trying to become like a better educator and communicator in this space. Is some of the people that I make videos for or meet with they're typically not engineers, but they're often engineering adjacent, like a PM or like a marketing ops person or like a sales ops person. Like they're definitely comfortable, if not with code, with coding concepts. And then some people are like the director of a housing nonprofit for whom like even saying like this workflow starts when an email is received, like that's quite a mental leap to come through. Oh, so when an email is received, it's going to wake up the AI to do something, and then you need to give the email to the AI so that it can analyze it. And the way you have to give it to the AI is you have to connect your Gmail account. Like, it's really challenging to come up with a kind of a single communication framework that can work for everyone. That's one of the things I'm honestly struggling with right now, is to figure out what are the right formats, what is the right level of technical sophistication, how much detail to go into. So right now I'm just trying everything and seeing what works, and occasionally some format will just start working, and that's a good sign that there's demand for it.
Yeah, I also think it's probably like what formats work will depend on like where we are in the adoption curve. But I think the reason why now I'm thinking about it, that I'm not surprised why this post with the webinar did so well, is because I'm basically like seeing two camps in LinkedIn right now. I'm seeing the camps of the people who embrace this technology, have experienced the gains for themselves, and they're like, yes, like this is amazing and this is saving me so much time. And you don't really need like a full demo. You're like, cool, like now I have a high level use case, I'm going to go and try it. Then you have the people that are curious, that maybe have tried it but have failed, and they're like, like I still feel like it's a little bit more hype, and I'm not fully sure that technology is there, and maybe they just needed to push or persevere maybe like 20% more. And then you have the complete deniers that are just like, this is completely overhyped. It's just a solution, or a tool that I don't need, basically. And I think the cool thing about the webinar is that you kind of invite the people that are maybe like stuck. It invites everyone to join and kind of get a better sense on more like primary source for themselves, whether this works or not.
And I think you make a good point about the different camps. I guess in general, social media is not great at handling conversations with a lot of nuance, like a nuanced middle ground. Like social media really rewards the people who are saying like, all jobs are obsolete tomorrow. Don't like, we're just all, humans have no value anymore. And then the other camp is AI is completely overhyped, either totally overhyped or terribly immoral. And so I think part of my role is to represent a hopefully compelling version of the middle ground, which is if you do a job, certainly a job with your hands on keyboard, AI is going to seriously change your work in the coming years. But also, like, it just because OpenAI launched a first version of Operator does not mean that all of humanity is obsolete, and to help people navigate that middle ground. And one of the things that I was thinking that I was talking with Ben about briefly when we spoke before this was, for PMs specifically, how might a PM think about navigating this? The working theory I have about PMs and companies in the age of AI, and this may only have a half-life of like a year because things are moving so fast that I've never been in a technological situation where we have to update our thinking so quickly. But like, if you're a very junior PM and your manager tells you this is a feature we want to create, you write a 10-page PRD, you set up your 3 weekly tracking meetings, like here's our bug triage meeting, here's our UX crypt meeting, and here's whatever our leads meeting. You take the notes in that meeting and send out the action items, and then you annoy engineers on Slack or designers when things are overdue. Like that job is not going to exist, or it's not going to exist in that form quite soon. Similarly, if you are a VP or senior director at a Google or Facebook and your whole job is playing organizational politics, figuring out how to wrestle away scope from your neighbors, figuring out how to meet the whims of some unpredictable executive, like I think that job will continue to exist at those companies for a while, but I think that is going to be a less important job going forward because companies are just going to be way smaller. If you look at the hot companies right now, it's Cursor, it's Bolt, it's Midjourney with a dozen or 20 employees hitting 100 million in ARR. The job that I think is really that we're all going to get to do, which is the most fun job for me and I think for many people, is like the super IC job, where you still have to be senior and strategic and autonomous enough to figure out, in the context of product management, what product should be built. How are we going to deliver it? How are we going to make our customers aware of it? Typically, that includes activities like talking to customers, trying out competitor products, trying out things for yourself, doing interviews about where people struggle in their day. That comes up with the how to build, the what to build. Then there's the find the right engineers and designers, motivate them, tell them why this is important and exciting and cool and why it's going to work, and work through all the nitty gritty trade-offs that come up in actual execution. And then it's figure out how to get it to your customers, whether it's via tutorial videos or email blasts or just flipping on a feature in some UI. Like, we're all going to have to do that job. And I think that's super exciting because I've worked with a lot of junior PMs over the years, either people that reported to me or that I was mentoring or have been in that role myself. And I've never heard anyone say, you know what I love? I love doing all the detailed revisions on the 10-page PRD. I love doing that. I've never heard anyone say that, but I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I love coming up with the idea of what we should build based on talking to our customers and looking at our competitors and seeing the opportunities and then figuring out how to rally a team behind it. Like, and so, yeah, that's my take on where the world is going, and at least for the next couple of years. And so the way I'm trying to carry myself career-wise, and the recommendation I'd give to everyone else is like, figure out how to be that super IC. And to be that super IC, you need to know what good looks like. You need to be able to create good yourself, but then you also need to be leveraging all the tools you can at your disposal to do as much of the drafting, the editing, the less creative work that now AI models are like probably even better at than we are.
I generally agree with you. Do you have a framework for basically what activities or what kind of responsibilities you can start to that you can start to basically delegate to AI today that AI is really good at? Maybe ones that are like in that bucket of like they can help accelerate that work, but you cannot fully delegate it. And then the ones that are like, we cannot delegate yet. And I don't think we will in 2 or 3 years or yet.
Yeah. I'll just tell you a bunch of the stuff that I've tried and what's sort of worked or not worked. Extracting structured information from an unstructured corpus works really well. So like if you have a PDF with an invoice on it, AI is going to be really good at getting the amount of the invoice and the vendor name, etc. And then similarly, if you have a piece of feedback from a customer and you want to figure out what part of the product this applies to, or which integration they tried to use, or what screen that they were on when they had the problem, like that stuff works super, super well. Extraction, summarization from like long unstructured to structured works really well. So I use that for a bunch of the operational use cases I have, like I mentioned, invoice management, payroll, that kind of stuff.
Bug triaging.
But now, exactly, I also use it for analyzing our feature requests and our bug reports. And even when we have like automatic error message, I try to figure out like what was the user trying to do when they ran into that error message. That works really well.
Release notes, probably another one, right? Like
very easily. So content drafting is the next one that works really well. Now, this one I have to give a caveat because it doesn't work out of the box. If you just go into ChatGPT and say, write some release notes based on these 5 features, it probably will not be at the level of quality that you'd want to ship. You probably need to do at least 2 things. One is you need to give it examples of high quality release notes you've written in the past, so it gets a sense of your personal communication style, brand structure. And then also what to include and what not to include. And then you'll also have to add to your prompt things like, here are some of the principles behind how we write release notes. These are the types of things we like to include. These are the types of things we don't like to include. Here's our company voice and tone. Some people like to have fun Slack style release notes where there's jokes and emoji, and others like to have much more miscellaneous bug reports and fixes, no information release notes. And content drafting works really well with a big asterisk. You have to put time into giving it examples and writing a really good prompt. But I use that for, yes, we do like our monthly change log of all the stuff that we've shipped in the product. We also, whenever we have a gallery post, like a new template, a new AI agent template that we post in our gallery, we use AI to automatically generate sort of like the step-by-step description of how it works, the social posts around it, the email newsletter post around it. I now have a bunch of training data from LinkedIn of which posts of mine perform well. And so I can actually screen share it if you're interested right now. I have this little sheet where I can dump in a content. Let me just show you because it's kind of cool.
Yeah. And maybe before we do that, one question around the content workflow. And yeah, I basically do the same thing with mainly for writing on LinkedIn. But the question that I have for you, once you figure out like a prompt that works well, how much revision are you doing or your team are doing? Is it almost like you just trust it and ship it, or do you still have a human taste?
I never just ship AI created content, even the ones that I've put a lot of effort into creating the prompt and the examples. I would still say it only gets it 80% of the way to the quality bar that I'd want to ship with. And I've worked really hard to like give the good examples and give the good prompts. And so that's why for all of my workflows and for the product we're building, this like human in the loop step where it's an approval or a refinement or a correction, there's a bunch of different human in the loop kind of verbs you might want to do. That's going to be so important. That's going to be so important because the main reason people don't use AI in practice right now is not because they haven't heard of it, not because they don't think it's cool, just because they can't trust it to do work on their behalves. And so I think products are only going to succeed with human. And so that's why for this LinkedIn content creation workflow, I just have it write to a spreadsheet. I don't have it post directly to LinkedIn. I write to a spreadsheet, and then in the process of copying it from the spreadsheet into LinkedIn, I often find that to be a nice, I hit copy paste, and then I use that as a nice forcing function that I actually have to edit it myself. Let me just show you this. I can just do a real post live, actually. That could be fun. I'll show you my whole workflow. So here is this spreadsheet I use I put in a content idea and it writes a LinkedIn draft. Let's say I have a content idea, which is AI agent to automatically reach out to podcast guests and send them an outline if they're interested. This might be something you guys are interested in doing. And so I put that content idea, and then I'll show you the workflow that's running behind the scenes. I have a lot of workflows, so it might take me a moment to find it. Yep, I think this is the one. Oh, shoot. Nope, sorry. That's not the one that's running right now. I do so much testing that...
And by the way, we can only see your spreadsheet right now.
Yeah,
so we cannot see
exactly. I'm just
stuff.
trying to find the right workflow. So let me just do it in this one. And so now you can see Relay.app. And so can you see my Relay.app screen, by the way?
Yeah. Just for the folks that are just listening, we're looking at, this is Jacob's company's app, Relay.app, and we're looking at AI drafting of LinkedIn posts from content ideas is the title of this page. Then there's a prompt.
So at the top of the page are some instructions of how to use this AI workflow for yourself. So it says, create a spreadsheet for content ideas, which I already have and I just showed you. Then it says, update your trigger and your update row step to use this new spreadsheet. So let me go through and do that now. The name of the sheet I used was, I think, LinkedIn drafts. And then you can see on the screen, once I've connected the right spreadsheet, you'll see here are the rows in the spreadsheet that this AI agent would have woken up for and created a draft for. So you can see the last three that I did: AI agent to automatically extract event details from emails, AI agent to automatically monitor competitor pricing pages, AI agent to automatically help real estate agent in Spain automatically filter new listings. And then the one I just put in was AI agent to automatically reach out to podcast guests and send them an outline if they're interested. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this AI workflow for that content idea I just gave it. And so I'm selecting that row in the spreadsheet. I'm creating a run, which is a running instance of this AI agent or AI workflow. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to look up all of my recent LinkedIn posts, because those are the examples it's going to use to figure out what my writing style is, what content has performed well for me in the past in terms of reactions and comments. And then the next step it's going to do is it's going to feed the content idea I just wrote down and the reference of my previous LinkedIn posts. It's going to run it through this AI prompt. I use Claude 3.5 Sonnet for writing. I might have to update this to Claude 3.7 now that this just came out, but Claude 3.5 has worked really well for me. And you can see I give it some extra information, like I was mentioning in my prompt. Write a LinkedIn post in my writing style based on the following post, but then I have to give it some extra stuff, like don't use hashtags, don't use emoji, keep the language practical and concise. And then what it's going to do at the very end is write the post back to the spreadsheet. And because it looks like it's taking a while to fetch from LinkedIn right now, we can continue the conversation. I'll get back to the example at the end.
Do you have to tell the agent where exactly in that spreadsheet to put the post that it drafts, or does it just know?
That's actually a great point. I can show you that. In this case, I am not adding a new row. What I want to do is I want to update the row that was already there. And so you can see that the row that triggered the workflow is going to be the same row that I'm going to add the output draft to. And so now I see that it's put a thing in the draft. So now let's see what it wrote. It said,
could you go back to the sheet for a sec?
Oh, yeah, I'm back in the sheet now. And so I'm saying, okay, so here's done. I just built an AI agent that automatically reaches out to podcast guests and manages outreach. Pretty happy with how it turned out. Here's how it works. You give it a list of potential guests with their LinkedIn profiles. The agent finds their contact info and crafts personalized outreach emails. When someone responds with interest, it sends them a brief podcast overview and outline. It schedules follow-ups for people who don't respond within a week. Everything gets tracked in a spreadsheet so you can see the status of each outreach. I built this because scheduling podcast guests was taking up a ton of time, and a lot of it was just repetitive email work that could be automated. Let me know if you're interested in trying it out, and I'll make a template that you can use. So that is not a bad LinkedIn post.
No.
That's pretty close to what I would post right now. And so I would go through and edit it and say, like, pretty happy with how it turned out. I don't really want to say that in this case. But the rest of it is pretty spot on. In this case, I haven't actually built that workflow yet out, but that's exactly what it would do and what it would look like. And so before I would post this for real on LinkedIn, I would actually test it to make sure I could do it. And for me, this is really nice because what do I like doing? I like coming up with the idea. And what do most people, I think, like doing? I like coming up with the idea of like, oh, here's a cool thing that AI could do. I then like playing around with it to see if I can actually make it work. And then I like tweaking the 300-word LinkedIn post to make it match what the thing actually does. But I often get real writer's block in between the 2-sentence description and the 300-word post where I'm like, do I want to put that sentence first or this sentence first? Or do I want to write it in this way or that way? And so for me, I can't quantify it in terms of time savings. I don't think anyone can really quantify anything in terms of time savings. But all I know is that this like materially reduces the friction for me to write high quality LinkedIn posts. Funnily enough, I actually wrote an AI generated LinkedIn post about this exact workflow that generates AI LinkedIn posts. And the comments on that are hilarious. Like 90% of the comments were like, oh, this looks really cool. Like I would love to have some help drafting my stuff and copy editing my stuff. Cause like those are parts of posting on LinkedIn that I don't love. And the other 10% were calling me like some combination of like lazy and evil and immoral. Like you're just creating this, AI slop that's going to lead to the same regurgitated content. And I hear that criticism. If the way this AI agent worked was like, look at the top 10 posts from various LinkedIn influencers, like whatever, Dharmesh from HubSpot or Greg Eisenberg, and it just literally regurgitated their content and wrote the same thing in my voice, yeah, that would not add much to the discourse. But in my case, it's an idea that I had that I think would be valuable to the people who are interested in my content. I just need a little bit of help getting it out the door. Anyways, that's a practical example.
Yeah.
So that's content drafting. The one other use case that works quite well is synthesis. So for example, every day we get a synthesized summary of the customer support issues that have come in, this many bugs, this many feature requests, here were the main areas of the product that people were talking about, here was their overall sentiment, like a little bit frustrated, but happy with the level of support they received. I also get weekly insights from all of the customer calls that I do, where it aggregates across all customer calls, like here were the features that jumped out at people, here were the things that were confusing. I have kind of two different ones. One is for customer calls where I'm talking more about like use case and kind of pitching the product, and another for usability tests, where I'm like literally helping them go through the actual process of setting up a workflow for themselves. Similarly, if you have a weekly spreadsheet that updates with all of your new users and revenue metrics and customer signups, like AI can write a great report of that for you. Tell me which new customers did we get, who churned, what do we know about the ones that adopted, where did our new revenue come from? And so those are the big three for me, like information extraction and summarization from a particular artifact, content drafting, and then synthesis across multiple. And then one flavor of that synthesis is use cases that, and maybe the fourth flavor is research use cases. Look stuff up on the web. Like there's that use case of tracking competitors' pricing, tracking competitors' taglines on their landing pages, looking up LinkedIn profiles. Like whenever a new user signs up for our product, we automatically look up their LinkedIn profile and I send them a connection request. That's super useful. Looking up the information about people you're going to meet before you meet with them. Those are the big four that I use right now.
Sorry, just to make sure I'm following. You said you have the ability to create an AI agent that will automatically send a LinkedIn request to someone after you meet them for the first time?
That no. Sending automated connection requests is against the LinkedIn terms of service. There are products that will do it for you. We don't. All our workflow does is it looks up the LinkedIn URL and it just sends me a DM that's just like, Ben just signed up. Here's his LinkedIn profile. Send him a connection request. It does all the hard work. And then I still have the last human in the loop step of just like clicking the URL and clicking connect.
That makes sense. Go ahead, Marc.
Which one out of the four things that you said, which one is the one that you think is like the highest leverage, or the one that's like, wow, I would be extremely upset? I bet it's probably the same, right?
For me, right now, I think it's the content creation ones that I rely on most, because content creation is such an important part of my job. And like I've been able to produce a lot of content. Like in a typical week, I can write 5 blog posts, 4 emails to our newsletter, 3 to 4 videos, 3 to 4 LinkedIn posts. That's the output of a decent sized marketing department. I'm not saying that because I'm amazing, just because I really rely on tools to help me do this. And then second, the synthesis from like customer calls and the synthesis of support cases, like that's really, really useful, because that's the kind of thing that I've always wanted to do, but never had the time to really do. And there are PMs who do it and do it really well and are really disciplined about it. But in my long history of working with PMs, that's the kind of tradition that lasts like 3 weeks. And everyone's like, oh, wow, amazing meeting, like great synthesis. This report was so useful. And then it just kind of tails off, because like
What do you use, Jacob, to record your calls, or like what's the input for that synthesis?
Yeah, so I personally use Fireflies, which is a meeting AI note taker. But there's a bunch of really good AI note takers, whether it's TimeOS or Otter or Fathom or Circleback, or there's probably a bunch more I'm not even naming.
Can Relay integrate with like all of them, or like what are the criteria for
Not always. So actually, most of those meeting recorders don't have APIs that we can directly integrate with. Fireflies does, which is one of the reasons I use it, because we were able to directly set up a trigger in Relay.app. A trigger is what kicks off the AI agent and gets it started working. Whenever a new Fireflies transcript is received, do some analysis on it. Or similarly, in this case, I typically will do a weekly trigger and then look up all the Fireflies transcripts that have occurred in the last week. If the product does not have an API, or has an API but does not have a native integration in our tool yet, you have 2 other options. Many products will support a technology called a webhook. And a webhook is just a way that a product can send you an HTTP request when something has happened. And for example, Circleback, we cannot directly integrate with them, but you can configure a Circleback webhook to be sent to you after each meeting. But in most cases for meeting note takers, all the others, other than Fireflies and Circleback, for like Fathom and Otter, we basically just parse the email summaries.
So one of the things we found out about Riverside, which is the tool we're using to record this, is that if you want to get transcripts of the episodes, they actually charge extra. I think we already paid for the product, but we have to like upgrade more just to get transcripts, which feels, I'm not happy about that. What we do is we take the video and then we end up creating the transcript from the video, and then we send it to ourselves, and then we use that to draft LinkedIn posts. Okay. Yep. So if we wanted to create a Relay workflow that took that process and automated it, so can we like send you to Riverside, be like, grab the video, extract a transcript out of it, like that kind of thing? Or is it not technology?
Let me tell you what I've gotten working and what I have not gotten working yet. That doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means I haven't gotten it working yet. So what I do for our YouTube videos is I generate an audio file when I generate the video file as well. Then when I upload the audio file to a specific folder in Google Drive, that kicks off my Relay workflow. So first, it transcribes the audio file using Assembly AI. It writes it into a Google Doc so that I can read the transcript in its raw form if I want to. And then it automatically generates several artifacts from that transcript. It generates a LinkedIn post. It generates a Twitter/X post. It generates an email newsletter post. And there's one more thing I'm forgetting now that it does. And so I have not yet been able to figure out like the very front end of that process of getting to the audio file. In theory, you could use something like OpenAI Operator to log. I don't even know if it would be able to log into Riverside with your credentials, but that's a very common situation where you need a human in the loop for kind of one link. And so if I were you, I think the best kind of the state of the art workflow you can do, unless you want to pay and upgrade your Riverside subscription, is download the thing, upload it to Google Drive, and then let automation take it from there.
Yeah. Just similar to what we're doing with Hunch, that we would upload the audio file and then that would trigger the transcription, and then it would like basically have all these different branches that would create the titles, tweets, LinkedIn
yeah, the other
posts.
thing I was going to mention, it creates the YouTube description with the chapters, which is super.
Right.
Because that's one of the most
show
painful
notes.
parts of making YouTube videos for me is like finding the exact timestamps of all the chapters and then writing those in. So having that automated is super nice.
Going back to the saving, like what is the highest leverage thing you're getting? So it sounds for you as the CEO, you're doing a lot of go-to-market, so it's like that content creation.
Yeah, I'm basically a content marketer right now. So for me,
you're just an influencer with a CEO title, basically.
You know, if only you could have told me from 3 years ago that this was going to be my job, I would not have believed you. But here we are.
But then for PMs, it sounds like your intuition is that probably the most helpful thing is like that synthesis of data. Is that, or like getting those reports is, or because I don't know, I'm like going back and forth, and I'm curious what you think, Ben. I feel like as PMs, you also have to create a lot of content, right? Either it's slide decks or status reports.
Yeah, I have a really hard time ranking it in the abstract. The way I always recommend it to like people I'm talking to or our customers is if you had an APM intern, like a really smart, ambitious junior in college that was just dropped into your lap, what would you have them do for you? Because that's a pretty good way of calibrating like the skill or the intelligence of where AI models are today, the level of kind of oversight and human loop you need to give. And often I find for me, when people ask me like, what would you automate? That question doesn't get me going the right direction, because often when you ask people, what would you automate, including me, I'm trapped in the past of what automate meant. And I'm thinking about much more like robotic stuff. But if you ask me like, if I had another intern tomorrow, what would I have them do? And for some PMs, it might be, help me write all the PRDs, help me write all the release notes, help me write all the user stories, or whatever it might be. For another PM, it might be help me triage all these bugs and figure out which ones I really need to look at and which ones should be. We built a pretty cool AI triager that kind of knows which engineer on our team has particular knowledge about which area of the product in the code base. So it automatically sends bugs to the right person. Like that's super useful. And so, I hesitate to give a one size fits all answer, but like really, if you're a PM, you need to be using AI for some combination of all of these use cases. Yeah. You're just going to fall behind if you're not experimenting with it actively.
Marc, I'm thinking back to our Q&A on Friday with Claire Vo, and I asked, what do you automate? And her response was, I don't know how much she was joking, but she pretty much said everything. Like, if I do it once, or if it might happen again, I try to automate it. There's not like a rule of thumb for like when to automate or not, but are there things that you're like, I could automate this, but it's either not worth the time, or I'd just rather it stay fully non-automated as it is today?
I do not think of automated or not automated as a binary thing at all. There's almost nothing I do that's fully automated, and almost nothing I do that doesn't have some AI assistance in it. I mean, even just by using the products we use, I use Gmail and I use Priority Inbox, or I use whatever tool I'm using. Like every product has some degree of built-in AI today. So I don't think of it so much as like, what do you automate? What do you not automate? I think about it more as to what degree is this particular task AI assisted, or to what particular degree is this task like mostly manual. And it could either be manual by necessity, because I just, like you said with Riverside, because we don't have the tooling or AI is not capable of doing it, or because I think there's unique human value in me doing it. So I'll give you an example of this. I I make all these YouTube tutorials, and they're super effective because they give people like a step-by-step guide of how to do something. They're pretty time consuming to record because I mess up the takes all the time, and I'm not a very fast video editor. Even I've tried all the AI tools. None of those have worked for me. I got my manual process to be decently efficient, but not perfect. And so I tried to see how far I could take it with AI, and I got pretty far. I got to the point where AI could automatically generate a full script. Like that example I showed you earlier, podcast guest outreach. I could show you right now. AI will generate a full script of a 5-minute tutorial video, and it will be spot on for how to do it in our product. Because I give it the training data from our last 50 tutorial videos, or 5 or 10 or whatever it is, and it knows the constructs of our product really well. I even made a little 11 Labs like voice avatar that would automatically read the script out. I couldn't find any way to automate the clicking around in the product. Like none of the computer use or operator type tools worked at all for that use case. But anyway, I got it pretty efficient where it would write the script, it would read it out in a voice that was like kind of similar to my voice, but not perfect. And then I would just have to like click around with the screen recording. I would record a little intro and a little outro, and then I would publish it. And the feedback I got was like, that was an area in YouTube videos where it actually being me on camera with my intonation, feeling like I'm working through it with you, made the content materially better. And so that was one where I actually retreated a little bit and I took some of the steps that maybe could have been AI generated and I did them myself instead, because part of the reason people like the YouTube videos I make is they have mistakes, they have stutters, they have things that don't quite work and then do work. And so that was an area where I ratcheted back, even though it was possible to use AI to get pretty far end to end.
I feel like the word for 2024 maybe in the AI space was like LLMs. And then the word for 2025 is agents or agentic workflows.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to get your thought on it, because like even the workflow that we sell on LinkedIn, I was like, to me, like I see that workflow and maybe I'm primed because I've used Zapier a lot. And if then there's that, I'm like, okay, that looks like an automation, but you called it an agent. So maybe what is your definition of an agent? Just because I feel like I've been getting so many different definitions.
I'll give you what I think is the most accurate technical definition, and then I'll tell you why I don't think it matters at all what the definition is. But I think the most accurate technical definition that separates an AI agent from an AI workflow is that an AI agent does runtime decision making about which tools it should call. And so you give it a goal, you give an agent a goal. Like the way you would create a true AI agent is you give it a goal that's just like, hey, make collateral based on my podcast recording. And you would say, agent, the tool, that's your goal, make collateral based on my podcast recording. The tools you have access to, you can write Google Docs, you can write LinkedIn posts, you can write emails, you can look up previous LinkedIn posts, you can look up files from my Google Drive corpus, you can look up blog posts on the web. So you would just give the agent a goal and a collection of tools, and it would go. And it would go and do the thing. And so at runtime in the middle of the use case, it would figure out which tools it needs to call, how many times it needs to call those tools to eventually achieve its goal. An AI workflow, on the other hand, you would typically give the AI more step-by-step instructions. Like, every time a new recording file is uploaded to Google Drive, I want you to automatically fetch my previous blog posts, fetch my previous LinkedIn posts, fetch this other thing from my knowledge base, draft a LinkedIn post, draft this, draft that. Here are all the prompts for those. So that's the technical definition of AI agent versus AI workflow. AI agent, goal with runtime tool calling. AI workflow, multiple LLM calls chained together, often interacting with your tools, but in a more kind of defined or prescriptive format. There's, of course, can be blends of those. Like in Relay.app, we can have blends. Like the thing I showed you is technically a workflow, not an agent, right? But you could totally have added, we have this agentic step in Relay.app where you can basically give it tools. Like you can browse the web, you can search Google, you can write Google Docs, and then you can create an agentic component within your workflow. I don't think people care about the difference at all. And I don't think anyone agrees about the difference. And I don't think the pedantic debate about what an AI agent is or an AI workflow matters. If you look at probably the most prolific communicator about AI agents, it's Dharmesh from HubSpot. He bought agents.ai. He just posted yesterday about how they have 1.1 million users. 99% of the things on there are not AI agents. They are workflows. They like take a YouTube transcript and write a LinkedIn post from it. Yeah. Nobody cares. Here's what I think matters with the term agent. And this is why when I started calling things agent, everything started doing way better. Like all of my content started performing way better. I think agent people have developed a mental model that when I say AI agent, it means the AI is doing material work on my behalf that I had previously thought only a human could do before. And that's what separates it from automation in people's minds. In automation in people's minds, at least when I talk to all of our users and customers, automation is, oh yeah, every time a row is added to Airtable, I send this email. Automation, I can do if this, then that. Whereas an AI agent, even if it is just an if this, then that automation with an AI step in between, I think of it as something that previously would have required human judgment or human reasoning or human capability. And I think everyone is going to call everything AI agent because that's the term that has mind share right now. And I think the words AI automation and AI workflow are just kind of disappear, and everything is going to be an AI agent. That said, I think there are three elements that will determine whether a product can create a successful AI agent, whether it's technically a workflow or technically an agent. And I think these are the three that I would keep in mind if I were a PM trying to build an AI product of any sort. Number one, the AI needs to be able to interact with my tools. If it can't write the thing to LinkedIn or can't write the thing into Google Doc or can't fetch the thing from Google Drive or can't get the stuff from Riverside, it's going to be fundamentally limited in the work that it can do on my behalf. And so like, yes, ChatGPT is amazing. I use it a lot, but it's not even close to my number one use of AI because it's a lot of friction to go there, paste things in, paste things out. The IO is really bad. And so you have to think about like, how is your AI system going to actually get stuff into where the user wants it? Number two, this is something that I think is really important and it cuts against the technical definition of an AI agent. I think AI agents need to tell people the plan of what they're going to do before they do it. Even that use case I was describing where I was like, let's say you give the AI agent the goal of creating collateral based on this podcast recording, and you give it this very broad tool access, searching the web, reading and writing all of your files, reading and writing all of your emails. Like, my first reaction when I hear that is I'm scared. I'm like, what is this thing going to do? Is it going to write 5,000 emails to every customer individually? Is it going to blow up my token costs by searching Google for 5 hours? And so one of the things that we're investing a lot in as a product is basically a flowchart-like representation by which the agent can communicate to you how it's going to approach this task. Now, this could be as simple as an if this, then that like style workflow, or it could be something a little more abstracted, like here's how I'm going to call my tools, and here's how I'm going to think about doing this, and I'll stop when this happens, and I'll keep doing this when that happens. So that's kind of at the planning phase, feeling confident that the AI agent is going to do the right stuff. And then the third is at the runtime phase, having a human in the loop. So going back, so let's say there's this AI agent or workflow that generates a LinkedIn post based on your podcast recording. You're going to want a human in the loop there. In fact, you're going to want multiple human in the loop steps. You're probably going to want one human in the loop step, which is like a refinement step, which is like, hey, AI, just go back and try again based on these notes. Let's emphasize this part of the conversation a little more, this part a little less, go back and try again. Then there will be another human in the loop step where it's like, okay, that looks pretty good. Now copy edit, make it really polished and ready to go. And then there'll be a final human in the loop step where you edit the content a bit before you post it on LinkedIn. And so those are the three principles I would keep in mind. Like, how is the agent going to work with your tools? How is the agent going to give you trust that it can accomplish the task you're giving it and then it has the right plan? And then number three, as the agent is doing the task, how does it keep you in the loop as you go? And I think that's going to be true for our product, but even if you're building an AI agent as a shopping assistant, I think the same principles would apply exactly. Like, how is the AI agent going to have access to your payment credentials or your accounts on online shopping services? How is the AI going to communicate how it's going to go about, let's say I want to buy new swimming flippers for my daughter, which I do right now. Like, how would the AI go about doing it? It would say like, hey, well, I'd go on Amazon, I'd enter these kind of search criteria, I'd look for the top rated items. Like, I would try to kind of balance cost and value. I'd look for things that are Prime eligible so you can get them. And then there's probably a human in the loop step, which is like, before you put my credit card down on anything, like, tell me what you're going to buy and why. So I think those principles are pretty generally applicable across agentic AI products.
Yeah. It's almost going back to your analogy of the intern, of what is the best interns that I work with. Probably they all hate those things, right? Like, they know how to use the tools that you're using. They know where to get the data. they're really good at managing up, of like sharing, here's how I'm going to do things, here I'm going to be transparent, and then they also have a really good awareness of what are the different checkpoints that
Yeah, and right,
that
and
you
like
have to
just
have.
like a human intern, as the AI gets better and better, maybe it doesn't need to tell you as much about its
Totally.
plan. It doesn't need to keep you in the loop as much, and that you and your AI agent will collaborate on that over time. Which is like, yeah, I know you know how to buy kids swimming gear now. Next time I ask for goggles, just go buy the goggles,
Totally.
or whatever it might be.
I'm kind of curious that we mentioned that today, for example, if I want let's actually stick with the definition of agent that requires it being able to ultimately pull the trigger on something on my behalf. And let's just assume for a second that we've found a satisfactory human in the loop mechanism that prevents it from doing the wrong thing. My sense is that the state of the art today is that it's not like I can tell an agent to go into a tool that requires like a username and a password on my behalf, and to go to a certain page in that tool and to collect a certain amount of information or take a bunch of, right? Are we there yet? Can I like give AI agents just like a URL and like username and password and be like, every time I want to do something in this product, just like plug these in and then figure out how to get what I want from this tool that I have access to?
I feel like
I
that
have
was
not
the
I have not had personal success in this area yet. So let me tell you about some of the products I've heard of or tried. So Claude Computer Use by Anthropic came out several months ago, and that controls your whole computer, not just your web browser. And I was unable to get that to do anything successfully. Not even like logged in on a URL with username and password, anything successfully. Then there's OpenAI Operator, which is also very general, and Proxy Convergence, I think, is one that just came out. I was getting some buzz a week ago. They claim to be able to authenticate into some tools, but not like anything that requires a username and password. They don't claim to solve every CAPTCHA. I struggled to get those to work. At least OpenAI's Operator seems way more designed for consumer use case. Like the demo they gave was like open table reservations. And so if you're trying to like update 1,000 leads in Salesforce, you should use the API for that. But like imagine your CRM doesn't have an API for some reason. I don't think that would work. I know there are several companies that are working on this specific problem of authentication and CAPTCHAs. AirTop is one that comes to mind. There's another that I'm blanking on right now.
An example use case maybe that we could,
Yeah.
if you want to guide your thinking
Yeah.
on this, is like one of the things Mark and I do is we look at data for how the podcast is performing on Substack or Spotify or these different tools. So if we wanted an agent that could like go and check those pages and give us like a summary once a week on just like pod performance in that area, right? If they don't have APIs that give us all that information, it would require an agent that goes and clicks in and gets that information, right?
Yeah, so logging in, clicking to one page, taking a screenshot of that page. Because once you got the screenshot, you're good. Then there are many mechanisms to kind of analyze that screenshot. I haven't actually tried this. We should. It would actually be fun to all try it together. My intuition is that today that will be a frustrating endeavor. You may be able to make it work, but it will be so painful that you'll wish you hadn't today. I think in 6 months or 12 months, that will feel easy. That's my guess of just where things are going there. For a simple use case like that, like log into a page, go to a dedicated URL, because it's probably the same like spotify.com/mypodcast/stats or whatever. Go to the same URL over time, take a screenshot of it and do it. Like that feels like one of the easier to accomplish authenticated browser tasks. If you were telling me here was a use case that actually came from a customer that we were unable to serve, which is they wanted to look at all of the clinical trial results based on a certain search query, open up the PDFs of all of the research papers and write a synthesis of them. And we had a really hard time getting like the pagination. It was like they had some anti-scraping protections that were hard for us to get around. Then the results were paginated. It wasn't exactly clear how to click and download the attachment. Like that one we were unable to do. And that was also a read-only use case. Now, let's say you want to go to a read-write use case of book me a hotel, go through multiple screens, put in my credit card information. That feels further out. So my current intuition is like the read-only use case, read-only analysis, like you mentioned, that doesn't feel that far away. A more complex read-only use case with like pagination and filters and stuff, that feels a little further away. And then read-write feels a little further away. But I think what I would recommend for PMs right now is if as a PM, pretty much everything you need to do in your internal tools will have APIs. And most of what you need to do on the web will be publicly accessible URLs that are crawlable. So I think for most PM tasks, you'll be able to get pretty far without worrying about how good browser-based agents are today. But we should talk again in 6 months or a year and see where the state of the art is then.
Question that got me thinking when you were sharing this is, how do you, like, when I hear you talk, it sounds like you have a good intuition for what is possible now, what will be possible like next 6 months and a year. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's a pretty useful skill to have right now, especially if you're building products, right? Because I think like
literally, if I was telling PMs to build one skill, it would be that. You don't need to know how LLMs work. I don't know how LLMs work, and I was pursuing a PhD in AI. Like, you don't need to know how LLMs work. You need to have really good intuition about what's easy and what's hard. Just like any good PM historically. Like, the thing that for me always separated the best PMs was like they had really good intuition about what was easy and what was hard, and that's what made their projects go way more smoothly than those who didn't. And so, yeah, you have to build really good intuition. The thing that's different now is it's changing so fast.
Right.
Like,
that's the hard part.
It's so hard because I remember, like, back when I was a day-to-day PM 2015, 2016, I would have one mental model about how long things would take, and then a year later, that same mental model would still be like pretty much right. Like, maybe we had done an infrastructure migration in one area of the code, and this was now a little easier to do than it was before. Like, we built some cross-product mobile infrastructure, so now I can think that doing changes simultaneously on Android and iOS is easier, and before that was hard. But like, basically, you could keep your mental model of like how long things would take the same. Now it's like every 4 weeks there's a model with like substantially different capabilities that you have to update to. And I don't think there's any substitute for trying stuff out for yourself. Like that, like, I watch a lot of YouTube videos, I read a lot of tweets, I read a lot of LinkedIn posts, because it's a big part of my job of like staying up to date on what's possible. And the only thing that really gives me confidence is just testing it for myself. Like actually testing out the product for myself.
Yeah, but even that testing part of it, like, it feels very daunting because the level of things that you could try are so, like, you have infinite options of things you could try. So I think what I'm trying to get at is, do you have a list of things that be like, hey, like, these things was not possible a month ago, but now I have an intuition that this is going to be possible. Like, how do you prioritize what you're going to test with these Zoom models every time they come out, basically?
I don't think I have a good answer to that, a good generic answer to that. For me, I just look at what use cases are coming up for me and for our customers. And so this is all I do. Like, half of every day, I'm on calls with customers asking them what they're trying to do with AI. And we try it together on the call, or I try it afterwards to see if it will work. And then I figure out this worked, this didn't work. Because for me, yes, there's a whole science of benchmarking, the SWE benchmark and the MMLU benchmark. And like, there's a whole bunch of benchmarks. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of thought leaders on YouTube or on LinkedIn on YouTube writing about like, here's what AI is good at, here's what AI is not good at. But I found that it's really task dependent. And it's also really about whether the juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak, of like the effort to make the AI work for you is worth the value. And so for everyone thinking about how to use it in their work, I would drive it based on your use cases and your users' use cases. And like, you should know what your top 10 use cases are. You should know what your top 10 user journeys are for your users. And then if today only 5 of 10 can be AI assisted, go back to number 6 and 7, like next month, you have access to 3.7 Sonnet or whatever, and see if 6 and 7 are now in play.
Yeah, I feel like it's such an interesting question to ask, almost like what's enough of development that should require someone to re-underwrite the narrative and the mental map, right? For example, 3.7 Sonnet coming out, I don't know if I need to re-underwrite anything in my head on how I'm using Claude based on that, but should I, right? I don't know. Yeah. In my mind, that model updates like that feel like they're in the category of generally like, I'll just get better versions of what I'm already doing. Is that kind of how you guys think about it?
I think the more interesting question too is like, how do I not get caught up in like incremental thinking, right? Because I'm like, oh, what if I can make this easier? But what if there's like a completely new way of working that is completely like, that I cannot even think about because they didn't have that foundation of how it worked, right? Like,
both fascinating questions. So I think for a long time, from like mid 2023 until late 2024, I was in the mindset you were describing, Ben, where I was just like, they get incrementally better and the class of use case is fundamentally the same and it just gets a little bit better every time. And so the use cases that weren't quite good enough are good enough now. And then I'm trying to think what changed. I think it was some combination of 3.5 Sonnet followed by deep research from OpenAI. Like those two kind of changed the game for me. Where like 3.5 Sonnet opened up a class of content creation use cases that were not possible for me before. That like before blog posts were AI slop, and with 3.5 Sonnet, like they were pretty good. And so 3.5 Sonnet was one big one that opened my mind to like, wow, this can do much more for me. And then deep research did the same for me on like the web research side. And so now I pay a little more attention to model updates than I did before. And I really try to answer them through the lens of like what totally new things are possible. And Marc, I think your point is spot on. I often fall into this incrementalism as a product builder where I'm like, oh, now that autocomplete might work. When in reality, maybe we don't even need the autocomplete at all because there's some new, easier natural language creation experience that totally shortcuts what that autocomplete would have done for us anyway. And so this
like,
is an area.
That's like the whole point around like, what do I even need a transcript?
Yeah.
Is there a world in which like I just go straight from audio file to like drafted posts that I can start editing, right? Or like the idea of needing a transcript as a step just goes away entirely. But I'm still stuck in that framework where I do need the dominoes have to fall a certain way for me to get what I want at the end. But every once in a while, one of these updates comes up and you just remove one of those dominoes and it just works better.
Yeah, you're so right. And I don't really know what advice to give other than when a new thing comes out, try to do something in a fundamentally different way, see if it works. And then you can like rebuild, restick in all of your incremental steps. Because for example, like I used to have a single Claude step that would try to generate the LinkedIn post, the YouTube description, where I originally had this single Claude 3.5 Sonnet step trying to generate everything. It didn't work. I struggled with it. And it was hard to debug because I was like, is the prompt bad for this or is the prompt bad for that? And I was writing 4 separate prompts in the same thing. And I was like, maybe it's getting confused about writing these 4 different content types in one, because giving the model too much extraneous information is like as bad as giving it no information. And so then I split that into 4 separate ones with 4 separate examples, and it all worked way better. And so I think you kind of have to approach it from both ends. One, try the one shot super ambitious thing and just see how far it gets and ask it to spit out its reasoning. Because then this is another like key tip, like spit out the reasoning. And many models now have reasoning as the reasoning models have a separate kind of like reasoning output that you don't have to ask them to. I was recently informed that this is called a boomer prompt. If you ask a reasoning model to output its reasoning, because they do that by default in the separate reasoning thing. And I was like, oh man, am I already a boomer? Like these reasoning models only came out like 3 months ago. But yeah, so you can try like, what I would recommend doing is like when a new reasoning model comes out, like O1 or O3 mini or O3 Pro or whatever, try to do the more advanced thing that was not possible before and look at the reasoning to see where the reasoning hangs up. And then typically you can factor it out into a couple of little steps. That's for a new workflow. Then what I also try to do is for my existing workflows, I try to look at the ones like, which are the ones that are convoluted? Like, did we really need an AI extract followed by an AI summarized followed by an AI draft? Or like, could we have just done that all in one and try to replace those 3 steps with one? And so I do both. On the other hand, for something that's happening frequently, cost is a factor. And so using the right model for the job is often important. And so it may be worth it to spend an extra hour prompt engineering so I can use the cheaper model every time. For now, like maybe the costs go to 0 eventually anyway, but that's something I'm not sure about. One last thing that was really interesting that I stumbled into that may be relevant for a lot of PMs is I had a task that required me to do some arithmetic on a spreadsheet. Specifically, we had this community challenge for our users where they could do stuff like comment on LinkedIn posts or answer support questions or whatever, and we'd give them some points. And the way it worked is they would send us an email with a screenshot of what they did. And then we had a separate AI workflow that would automatically parse the screenshot and assign points based on our points key. That worked really well. But then we ended up with this spreadsheet of every single entry in the community challenge, like who did it, how many points it was worth, and the supporting documentation. And we needed to create a leaderboard. Which was like a group by and then a sum, because we need to find out like, here's all the stuff Ben did, here's all the stuff that Marc did, here's their sum. And this was really hard for the state-of-the-art AI models 3 months ago. GPT-4o Mini couldn't do it at all. Totally wrong. 3.5 Sonnet like almost got it right, but it got one of the sums wrong. 01 was able to do it correctly, but at a ridiculous cost, And I was thinking to myself, like, what am I doing here? You could write like 2 lines of JavaScript to do this sum and it would be faster, it would be free, and it would work perfectly every time. So what I switched to doing was, we have a little feature in our product where you can generate JavaScript code, but you can generate the code using an AI prompt. So I just went to, and we power that with Claude 3.5 Sonnet. So I just went into this like in-product code generation experience. You can do the same in Cursor or Windsurf or GitHub Copilot or whatever. Just, hey, write me a little JavaScript script that takes in a CSV in this format and outputs a leaderboard in this format. And the models are amazing at writing little JavaScript utility functions like that. Like, that just works out of the box. And so that's another thing that I think is important to keep in mind when you're using AI in your work or building AI features in your product or thinking about this debate between AI agent and AI workflow. Yes, sometimes you really do need this agentic runtime decision-making and reasoning, but it's way more expensive, it's way slower, and it can be less reliable. So if you already know the 5 steps that you want it to take, just tell the AI what 5 steps it's supposed to take, and you can skip over a lot of that uncertainty. And that's like the analogy kind of applies. It's the same as like, if you have a step in your workflow where you just need to do some arithmetic on a spreadsheet, just ask the AI to write a JavaScript function or a Python script for you to do it, rather than making a reasoning model try to solve this math problem at a cost of like $5 per report.
Yeah, and it's also slow too. Like, you might be waiting like a minute to wait, which is like nerve-wracking.
Exactly, when
too.
like it's literally just summing numbers in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
It sounds like almost like a last mile delivery problem. It's like get things to the last mile and then rely on maybe like more basic logic and then like the existing things. Like,
that's why, like, I think this framing of like automation is something automated or something automated binary is like not the right way to think about it. It should all be on a spectrum of like, how much is AI assisting me in this work? And have I found the right balance point where I'm doing the things that either I'm uniquely good at or are sufficiently low friction for me that I don't really care, where AI is doing the things that really annoy me or that it can do better than I can do.
Yeah. I think the ones that are really hard to is the workflows that completely change the way you have historically worked with your team. Like a big example that I've been thinking about lately, and that I had like a bunch of designers get angry at me, was basically I was explaining how before maybe the step function was like you write a PRD through like chat PRD or like a good prompt. Now you can actually just write the PRD, create a whole prototype and test it with customers in 2 hours, where before like maybe 2. And maybe the PM can do that, right?
Which tools are you using for the prototyping part?
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of user testing myself because I'm not using like a software product, but I've played with them. But what a lot of people use basically is Bolt or Lovable. Like, those are the main 2. And the idea is like what some people are doing too. They're actually even putting metrics into, they're using like PostHook, or we had someone in the podcast calling and showed us like you can put like either Hotjar or PostHook, and you actually not only get the qualitatively data, but also the quant data of like how people are using it. And that's completely like, that's like it almost breaks your frame. And I think that's where a lot of people are struggling. We need to like have this product process that we followed, and we need to do design create, and we have to like, which is, I think it's like what a lot of people struggle with basically, is reframing their reality and almost feeling like maybe part of my identity is being attacked because like you just shortcut me in a way.
Totally. And I don't have a great answer for that other than run towards it rather than away from it. And if you feel like, oh, wow, this process has cut out something that where I thought I added a lot of value, it's like, well, you got to find another place to add value now. Like, and I'm sure you can. If I had a designer that was frustrated by that, I haven't used Lovable or Bolt outside of toy contexts. I haven't used them for really like production work in our product, in product or anything. But my sense from playing around with them just as a hobbyist is like, they get you to 80% quite effectively, but probably you go through that user research and you're like, ooh, that popover or like that slide out menu wasn't quite intuitive. We need to really focus in on that part of the design because it's so important for users. They've stumbled on it every time, and that built-in component doesn't work. Let's design something custom to solve that problem. And so that's why if I were a designer, I would look at that as, wow, what an amazing opportunity. Like, I can now focus my time on the hardest and most important design problems rather than spitting out another settings page or spitting out another like Ubi flow that everyone has done a million times.
Yeah, where existing patterns are available, I don't know why designers want to spend their time. Like,
you should be using those patterns anyway.
I agree. I know we're coming up on time. I actually do have a hard stop in 2 minutes, so I think this might be a good place to wrap. Marc, was there anything you wanted to cover before we ask our final 2 questions?
No.
Cool. So I was pretty quiet in this conversation because I was honestly just learning so much. I'm just absorbing. I think this space is moving so fast. Our last guest, Jacob, was a guy named Will, who's a designer at Amplitude, and he described his feeling like we're all like stumbling. We walked into a dark room together, and we're just lighting one candle at a time to illuminate the space. And so I feel like I'm just learning so much every day. So I appreciate you joining us. The final 2 questions we have are: 1, where can people follow what you're working on and thinking about? And then 2, how can they be helpful to you?
Yes. So number 1, on LinkedIn, maybe we can put a link to it. That's where I post really regularly, 3 or 4 times a week. And that's usually like inspiration, use cases, and quick hits of here's how you can use AI. And then I have a YouTube channel where I record like in-depth, sometimes 45-minute or hour tutorials about how to build something, and you can join one of our live sessions. And then second, how people can help me, use cases. Use cases where things are painful for you in your work today, or things that you've tried to build with AI but haven't quite figured out. Please just message me directly and say, we have this annoying release note. We have this annoying new feature blog post process, and it's super time consuming. And I was trying to figure out AI to do it, and I couldn't quite get it to work. This is gold for me because I want to see if our product can help with it, or if I can point you to some product that can help with it, and then turn it into content on LinkedIn and YouTube to keep the virtuous cycle going.
I love it. We'll include links to those in the episode notes, and we would love to have you back on in 2 months when the entire world is different, apparently. And then
exactly. We'll see when that is. Thanks, guys. This was a lot of fun, Ben and Marc, and I'll talk to you both soon.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, bye.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone who you think would benefit from it as well. We really appreciate it. We'd also love a follow or a rating on Substack, Spotify, or YouTube. That's going to let other people find us. And if you have any topic recommendations for a future episode, please send myself or Marc a DM on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks.